welcome to Revival Town Podcast. I'm Chuck Tate. That's Andy King.
What's that?
Man,
That was great. That was
man,
great.
I'm feeling good today.
Oh, today's going to be good.
It's
People
good.
are in for a treat.
Hey, I'm glad to be alive.
Oh. Hey, did I
happy
see?
to be alive.
Did I see? Before we get into what we were going to, did I see you taking a bit of photos in a photo shoot the other night, Mr. Model Chuck Tate?
Well, thanks for the ride, by the way.
Oh yeah. And I had to pay for my own parking. Yeah, no problem. It was only $1 though. We're fine.
Yeah. Well, we'll take it out of the Chinese fund.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, but yeah. So I did had a photo shoot yesterday afternoon for the new book.
The new book.
Yeah,
Any
it's getting real.
Any dates or anything like that? You know
So
yet? Or is it too early?
It's looking like the second week in January, but there will be a book cover reveal soon, and I believe sometime in August it will show up on Amazon for pre-sales.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, so I'm reading the galley copy right now, so it's completely done, and it's just like a kind of like a final review. It's already been edited and everything, but yeah, I'm just reading through. It's like a proofread.
Yeah.
And
Got a few people endorsing?
working on that right now. Yep, I have somebody I can't say yet. Somebody
Yeah.
is writing the foreword. I'm really excited about that.
Yeah.
And I will say it is a guest who has been on Revival Town podcast.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had almost 200 guests.
It
but
wasn't your co-host.
It wasn't. However, people
obviously.
will be interested in knowing that there is a chapter that details a story about you.
Well, you know,
And there's also some Revival Town references throughout the book.
sometimes you
scattered throughout it.
You got to make an effort sometimes.
Yeah, you
for
know
your
what?
friend,
I'm just
you know?
like, I've got to. I don't even think it's. I guess I can find a way to work in. Andy.
yeah. It's the last chapter, and it's the dregs of the stories. Yeah.
It's where I tie it all together.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, but you were telling me, I want to share this because we nearly didn't have a Chuck Tate with us.
I didn't. I wondered myself, man.
You got to tell us about this story.
So I started running again, and my deal is I run 2 miles, I stop at this cove, and then I record a video that I post on TikTok and Instagram, just encouragement, hope-filled post. And I was walking back, and my routine is when I'm finished doing the post, then I walk back, and it's about I don't know, a third of a mile, quarter of a mile. Then I just walk home and I edit the video. So I was, and whenever I was on my phone, it streams into my hearing aid, so I couldn't hear what was going on outside, even though I was outside. And I'm just walking, I'm editing this video, and I'm listening to it, and I'm putting in captions and stuff. And all of a sudden, I just felt like I'm being watched, right? Mm-hmm. And I look, and there is a pit bull right next to me. And it's growling.
A pit bull dog.
A pit bull dog. And I'm going to be honest, and I don't care who I offend. I hate pit bulls. I don't like them. I never will. I don't care if yours is nice. I do not like pit bulls. It's the only dog that you ever read about where it kills somebody or turns on their owner. I mean, I think they're evil. I think
they're banned in England.
Are they really?
I do believe there's a bunch of dogs like this.
I like England even more now.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah. I do know people that do have pit bulls that are friendly, good dogs. But I just, man, I'm never going to warm up to one. And I don't have to because I'm called to love people, not dogs. Whoa. But anyway, no. So, but no, honestly, it was ripped. This pit bull was not just a little dog. It was a pit bull. I mean, it was large. It was built solid, man, and it was growling at me. And I could tell it was about to attack me. So I can't show fear. Now, because I have been bitten before on run, like 3 or 4 years ago, and it was by just a friendly neighborhood dog. So I'm like, this thing can, honestly, it could kill you. I mean, it's... Yeah. If it get a hold of you right and you can't get help or whatever. I mean, I was pretty nervous, thinking about what I was going to do, ready to start rebuking it in the name of Jesus or whatever. I mean, but no, I run with mace on my wrist. Well, since I was walking home, I took it off and it was in my pocket. So as I'm standing there, I'm thinking my mace is in my pocket, and this thing is, I didn't know if he was testing me. So I didn't know if I should be forceful and say, no, go home. You know what I mean? But I could tell it was going to attack. So I put my hand in my pocket very slowly, and I pulled out the mace, and I had my hand on the trigger, and I decided before I spray, I'm just going to maybe just keep walking, and maybe it'll just run away. So I went to take a step, and it went and got in front of me, and it blocked my path and stared me down and was still growling. And at this point, I could just tell it was going to lunge. I was going to spray. It was going to lunge. It was going down. But just as this was happening, a guy in a truck saw this, and he stepped on the gas, and he came flying at the dog, blaring his horn. And it scared the dog, and the dog ran across the street into a yard. And then I said, thank you so much. You just saved my life. Yeah. And just about that time, the owner of the dog came out. He had been doing some work on the side of the house, and he saw it, and he kind of yelled at it, and then the truck drove off, and I'm like, thanks again. And then I started walking, and the dog ran away from its owner and was charging to me to attack.
Oh, my.
And the owner barked some type of instruction at it, like, stop or whatever. And it did stop, and then he went and grabbed it. And I'm like, oh, my gosh, that was close.
Yeah.
So I have a friend who attends our church. He's an officer. He's also deals with animal control. And I talked about it. He said it's illegal in the state of Illinois to have a dog like that without a leash. So, and there's kids everywhere. I can't even believe that this owner did not have this dog on a leash. So,
wow.
Yeah. So he's going to be paid a visit.
Well, you talked about police.
Yes.
Good segue.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I love the police. And our guest today is the National Chaplain for the police in the UK.
Yeah, Matthew.
Good friend of yours.
Matthew Hopley. He has been literally from day one of Revival Town. He has been a listener. He's helped me with some of the Tate and his mate words that we do at the end.
Yeah, he's good people.
It was
nice to meet him and to kind of see his face on the Zoom.
Yeah, great guy. And this one is a great conversation with him. Like you mentioned, he is now the National Chaplain for the police department in the United Kingdom. So for the whole of Great Britain. And it's
amazing.
Wow.
It's a great story. This is a great episode.
This is really
And you got to listen to the end because we end it different than normal.
Oh, yeah. So why don't you sit back, relax, and enjoy this conversation with Matthew Hopley.
This podcast is part of the Edify Podcast Network. Edify is a faith-inspiring app that brings together thousands of the best Christian podcasts in one place for your listening enjoyment. Cut through the noise and grow your faith by diving into the world's top Christian podcasts today. Download the Edify app for free from the App Store or Google Play, or by going to edify.app. That's EDIFI.app.
Okay, Revival Town friends, it's time for our weekly conversation. Today's guest joins us all the way from the United Kingdom. Matthew Hopley is a lay minister with Trinity Church, which is part of the Assemblies of God of Great Britain. And recently, Matthew was commissioned as the National Police Chaplain for the UK. Matthew, welcome to Revival Town.
Hey, it's great to be with you guys.
It's really good to see you, mate. We go back a long way. In fact, we were talking, and I'll let you share the story, but our dads were both pastors at the same time in the UK. Used to go to what used to be called the Minehead Conference way back in the day, right? Yeah. Which was like, for those listening in the States, this is where all the Assemblies of God churches or pastors, they would take over this. It's hard to explain. I don't even think they got anything over it.
It was the worst pastor's kids' holiday ever. That's what it was.
It's like there were chalets, like 8,000 apartments. They're all connected, and you would rent a chalet for the week, right, as a family. But then people from the church could go as well. So there was 8,000 or so people there.
Like a little city.
Yeah, and there was like fairgrounds, there was swimming pools, so it was like a vacation for families, but then at night they would have these huge celebrations and fly in people from all over the place to speak, and there'd be top worship and it was for me, I looked forward to it every year just because I knew I'd be connecting with other pastors' kids and other friends, and we could stay out all day and play football and all this. So
it's true.
But
that's the downside to it, though. In the midst of all of that, that was often the family holiday for the year.
Yeah, that was it.
You'd get there, and then you wouldn't see your father, you wouldn't see your dad for the whole of the day. And it was in the days in the evening where your dad would put a suit on and go to the evening service as well. You're like, great family holiday this was. It was. We did have some fun though.
Yeah, we did. So, but obviously your journey, and we're going to talk about this in a real extensive way, especially with what you're doing now. But we thought we'd bring you on and talk about, you went through COVID really in the midst of a building project, which is a nightmare to do a building project anyway, anytime, but then in the midst of COVID. And so I thought if you would come on and just talk about your journey, and then also touching on that, and then we'll touch into working for the National Police Department in a little while. But just tell us about who you are.
Yeah, so let's start with the where am I from. So I am a Brummie, which is the nickname for someone who's from Birmingham, born and raised here, still living in Birmingham, and I grew up in a Christian household. So my grandparents, my parents were pastors of churches here in Birmingham, and my sister's also a pastor as well, but she's an Elim pastor, so we don't talk about that because I'm an AG pastor. Well, we'll forgive her. It's all good. So I've been a part of the staff team in Birmingham for 13 years until earlier on this year, and I've had a role change. But in that 13 years, I've been working part-time for the church. And in my portfolio, there was two real key areas that I looked after. So volunteers. So we've got about 100 volunteers who I looked after. So part of that was equipping and training, making sure that they were released to serve in the ministry areas that were appropriate for their gifting. And then the other bit, which ended up taking over my whole life, was the construction of a new church program, a new church building right next to Birmingham City Football Stadium, which is where we were holding our church services whilst we were building the new church building. So that has been an incredible challenge. It took way longer than any of us anticipated, us having to go on that incredible journey of seeing God's faithfulness, all the challenges that you have to navigate. Any construction company that you speak to who have had involvement with a church program, they say church programs never go according to plan. Even when everything logically should, even when the paperwork's all lined up, the finances are still there, church building programs never go to plan. So
they either make or break a church.
Oh goodness me, I can testify to that. So leading on that has been really, really good. And now we opened the church back in October of last year. So it's great to see all of our worship services in there and activities starting to grow and develop during the course of the week. So it's brilliant seeing that happen.
How has it been?
God's faithfulness has been great.
How has it been? Because obviously Chuck, pastors a church, and through COVID, and he won't mind me sharing this, through COVID it was tough, right? A lot of and just trying to navigate, and what we could do, what we couldn't do, mask, no mask, people mad
at both sides.
Yeah. And obviously the UK had it really hit the UK hard because of it being a smaller island. But coming out of COVID, how do you feel the church for you, where you're at, and the church as a whole in the UK, how do you feel they're doing?
Yeah, one step back from that, I had to lead in our church on all of the COVID restrictions.
Oh, okay.
So in interpreting what national government was saying, so they were the big rules, then local authority or local government, which was laws and rules that were more restrictive on a local basis. And then also as our own church, we had to decide what was proportionate for us as well. So I had to interpret that, write the policies, procedures, and work out how you social distance a congregation when we were eventually allowed to get back together. And, we had this booking system where you had to book families together, and they had 4 seats there and then 2 meters and then a single seat. And it was just, it was really, it was a difficult journey. But in the midst of that, we were quite blessed that in the late December, early January, as a church, we just started live streaming our services. So it helped us get used to having a bit of a wider reach than just our congregation. Sure. So that gave us a bit of a head start. So we switched straight to technology as soon as we could. We started gathering people initially on Zoom, and then we started pre-recording services and sharing them, which was interesting because you could see how your viewer engagement was versus what your Sunday attendance would normally be. And we could see that the viewer engagement was down to what the numbers would be of physical people in the building. But some of that was to do with the demographics of our congregation, people who maybe didn't embrace technology and so on.
Yeah, right.
But I think what has happened is it was a bit like a raging storm that physically blew through. And those who were deeply rooted have stood the test of time. Yeah. And there are some people who got caught up in that storm who just got blew away and didn't really know where they needed to end up. Some have reappeared. Some of them seem to have been gone for good. People who you thought would be around for ages, who have vanished, and occasionally you see them pop up on social media, and you're like, "Oh wow, I haven't seen you for a while." Yeah. But it really did shake the tree, and you were left with people who were well and deeply rooted. You press fast forward though for us, our dynamics are slightly different because of opening the new church building. That has been something that's interested people, and it's brought people in. So we've had a whole influx of not just people who have left from other churches who have been walking in the wilderness trying to find somewhere where to go, but people who are new to faith, people who've been brought up with a Christian setting, a Christian faith, but haven't been in a church setting in recent years. And they're like, "Oh, there's this brand new shiny church in our community.
Build it and they will come."
Settle. Absolutely, absolutely. And we've experienced that. So in the midst of it, I think probably the analogy that sums it up well: the storm ripped through, and those who were deeply rooted stood the test of time, and they are bearing fruit in their lives again.
Wow. What about a national level? I know because you guys are pretty close to the AG setup nationally. What's the pulse on what's going on, all over the country?
Yeah, so we in Assemblies of God Great Britain, we've experienced almost like a rejuvenation as a denomination, as a movement. So Pastor Glyn Barrett from Audacious Church took on the national leadership role for Assemblies of God a number of years ago. And that reinvigorated what was happening with Assemblies of God, and it attracted people who maybe been a little bit on the margins. It was great being at the conference this year in May and seeing the volume of people who graduated or were commissioned as pastors. The numbers are increasing. Hearing the data of how many people who are, sorry, I'm just pausing there because I said data, not data. The data, because every now and again,
okay. I'm outnumbered by Brits today. You can say whatever you want.
You slip up, Andy. I hear you slip up. Man. I'm going to keep you true today. I am keeping you true.
Thank you.
You see the data of the amount of people who are currently doing the ministering training program, and the numbers are increasing year on year on year. So the vital signs of health are good for the Assemblies of God Great Britain. And another sign there is the amount of church plants that have happened in the last 18 months and what's on the horizon for the next 2 to 5 years. So all the data is definitely going in the right direction. And generally, I think those churches where maybe the leadership weren't that deeply rooted, their roots have become a bit weak. I think some of those churches did struggle through COVID, and they haven't caught up with their trajectory.
Right.
And that's caused some of those leaders to really kind of reevaluate. But I hear stories from around the globe where lots of churches just shut down or just had to let staff go, or had to, their lead pastors have walked away from ministry. I haven't heard that to that extent in Great Britain.
Right.
But some churches have experienced a real hit on their amount of people in their congregation. But we haven't had the same anecdotal stories here around ministers leaving ministry either, which has been great for us.
That's good.
We're getting ready to finally open back up. And
yeah.
It's been a long vacation for Chuck.
As you were talking, man, I was thinking about Jesus and the story of two builders, one who built a house on rock, one who built a house on sand. And it's if we're not building our life on the foundation of Scripture, when the storm comes, whether it's COVID or any kind of storm, we're going to be swept away. And I think we've seen the same thing. I think really the global church has probably experienced the same thing. Those who were deeply rooted in a firm foundation of faith, it didn't faze them.
And I think as well, you mentioned it, you guys had to embrace technology. And I think there's a lot of churches who did not and who were fighting it. And they're the ones who struggled the most. Now, what I have seen over here is a number of churches that are taking their online presence off. So they've stopped. I saw Chris Brown's going to be doing that, not having an online service because they want to drive people back into the building.
We stopped live streaming our services at Trinity Birmingham for a couple of reasons, but the main reason wasn't for that. We'd moved into this brand new building. We've got this wonderful, great AV tech set up. And our priority really needed to be about that experience of people coming together to worship and be in the presence of God. And our focus needed to be on the people who were actually physically in the room.
Yeah.
So we've changed our methodology that we will share our preach from the Sunday during the course of the week.
Yeah.
And we've found that's working well for those who are shift workers, or those, we've got people who do quite a bit of traveling. It means that they're still connected to the word, but actually drives the appetite then to be involved with the Connect group during the course of the week. Yeah. So the relational, pastoral, the gathering of the saints, the Acts 2 foundation of church life becomes amplified in what you do during the week and not just about on a Sunday.
Yeah.
So we may well return to live streaming our services. We'll see how that unfolds.
Yeah.
But yeah, we were definitely focused on let's make sure the prize is the people who've gathered in that moment to worship collectively.
Yeah, I go both ways, because there's a side of even the non-Christian who's just thinking about church and checking out, man, would I fly with this, right? Is this something I'm drawn to? There is something about being in the room and the atmosphere and presence of God, and you can't convey that online. Yeah. So I go back and forth. Obviously,
I'm on the other side. I definitely see your point, and even Chris Brown's. For us, we've had a number of new families that have come who said, we've been watching for a few months, and we finally came. But I think if our focus is on those who gather, that's obviously the most important thing. The Acts 2 model is, hey, don't get out of the habit of gathering. The early church, they met daily. This is, and let's do life together. This is a community. This is so vital for you to come. And I communicate that even to our live stream crowd. This absolutely. You watching cannot replace what we have going on in this room right now. You need to get here.
Yeah, and that's the key is trying to share with folks. You can watch, but you have
if we
no
didn't
idea.
do that, we would have to pull it.
Yeah, you have no idea what's going on in this room right now. You know what I mean? Yeah. So yeah. Well, let's shift a bit, because I know many months ago we connected over Zoom. You were looking at an opportunity that was coming up, and you said, "Hey, Andy, just let's talk through this because I just need someone from the outside to talk, which I was privileged that you asked me. And I was blown away by the opportunity that you had just because I know you and the impact that you could have, which now is in this new role that you've taken, and being able to speak into someone's life that isn't even a believer, but you could really bring the light of Christ in someone's life. So why don't you explain where you went from the church, working for the church, right, to now what you're doing, and explain what you're doing.
Yeah, sure. So I felt really challenged. So my background in the corporate world, I did 15 years working for a small company that you may have heard of called Walmart. So
I didn't know that.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
So Walmart's presence in England is through a company called Asda. And so Asda stores, big grocery store, Walmart were fascinated by how on such a small footprint we could have such high turnover of sales. So you imagine walking around a Walmart in the States, you've got plenty of space, big tall racking and all this kind of stuff. Well, the footprint of a superstore in Great Britain is a lot smaller. And Walmart were fascinated by how do we get so many sales out of a small footprint, which led to them actually buying Asda in the United Kingdom.
I did not know that. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so interesting.
Yeah, so some of the concepts that Walmart had were brought into the UK, and some of that was embraced really well. It came to something when they started to they wanted to try and sell guns, and that is not going to happen in the United Kingdom. They for a while they did try and sell all of this like hunting gear and like fishing stuff, and again, it's not a regular supermarket kind of thing here. Yeah. But yeah, some of the Americanisms didn't translate well into our world, and some of the British ways of doing retail didn't translate back into Walmart. But I worked for them for many years. But I got a really good role. I really enjoyed what I did in that world. So I was an investigator. So I used to deal with internal crime. So for staff who were involved with dishonesty, deceit, fraud, embezzlement, all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
So my job was to investigate those kind of wrongdoings and work out whether there was a crime to prove or whether it was a mistake that somebody had made with an administration mistake. And to follow that right the way through the civil justice program and eventually, maybe end up in court, going to prison, all that kind of stuff.
Now, was that just in Birmingham, or was that all over?
No, so that was right across the United Kingdom. And when Walmart bought Asda, we'd got a footprint in Germany as well at that time. So yeah, it was a fascinating period of my life. But in the midst of all of that, although I enjoyed what I did and I got a great sense of purpose and fulfillment out of what I was doing, the purpose and the fulfillment started to diminish, and I really felt the call of God saying, I've got something bigger and greater for you. And this sounds like a long time ago when I say it now, but on the day of the 9/11 attacks, I remember being stood in one of our stores and a tannoy call had gone out on the PA system. And I recognised the call was to say that there was a violent shoplifter, so somebody who steals from the stores. So I went out as a visitor, I went out there to intervene and to help resolve the issue. And as I got there was this shoplifter who got these glass bottles of alcohol. He was trying to smash it around the head of the security staff. And we end up having to restrain this guy. We call the police come and he gets arrested. And my mobile phone is ringing over and over and over again in my pocket. And it's Donna, my wife, ringing me. So eventually, once this guy's in handcuffs, I answer the phone and Donna says, "Have you seen what's going on in the States?" I was like, "I've got no idea." So she explains that one of the towers have been hit. And I'm like, goodness me, that's horrific. And I'd been to New York so I could visualize the space that we were talking about.
Yeah.
And whilst I'm on the phone, she says, "Another plane's just hit the second tower." So I'm talking to the two police officers who were there about what's going on. We end up going and standing in front of a TV so we can actually see for ourselves and understand what's going on. And I just remember something inside of me just feel so challenged in this moment that I'm giving my everything in this workplace. Like literally taking a swing of a bottle around my head, which ultimately is lining some director, profit shareholder somewhere with money. What is my life worth? What am I putting my life on the line for? And that was the start of a trajectory change in my life that happened as a result of what was going on. And it led on a journey of me trying to just wrestle with, well, what does purpose and fulfillment really look like? And I just knew the call of God was on my life, but I didn't know what it was meant to be.
Yeah.
And what I've learned, and this might resonate with you or with anybody who's joining us today, that I used to be a little bit envious. And if this has happened to either of you, then please forgive me. But I thought as a 12-year-old or something, God would send somebody to prophesy over me and say, hey, Matthew, when you are an adult, you're going to preach to stadiums packed full of 20, 30, 50,000 people, or you're going to launch a non-for-profit or a charity that's going to... I never had a prophecy over me, anything like that. And, you know, I think if that had have happened to me as a young person, I'd have seen it kind of like as a... Do you remember the old atlases that had got all the maps of the roads on? I think I'd have seen it as an atlas of, this is where I am today, and God's told me that this is where I'm going to be. And I would have done the navigation myself to get to that point. But actually what I've found is the way in which God communicates with me is way more like a sat nav. At the next exit, take the third junction. And you take the exit, you get to that third junction, you keep going and you wait and you listen. And then God says, coming up, take the left turn. And that's how God has worked with me. And I felt that I had to take this huge step of faith to leave the corporate world without a job to go to. I should have had like 12 weeks notice, and I managed to negotiate it down to 4. I was like, if I'm going, I'm going. The company was scared that I'd got something on them. I had 6 exit interviews from the company because they thought I was going to.
Well, you do look a bit like a criminal. Let's put it.
I'm going to unpack my investigation.
You wait till I tell you what I really found out.
And then you started swinging bottles around.
That's it. That's exactly how it was. Yeah. And I left without this job to go to, but you know, within a few days of resigning, the Lord opened up an opportunity. I did a 12-month contract with an IT company as their general manager. I only generally need to touch a computer and it would crash. So I probably wasn't the best person to do that job. But so I did this job for 12 months. And that, even now, the consequences of being faithful in that moment are still reaping benefit in my life from the contacts that I'd made that kind of 15 years ago. And I'm grateful for those moments, but sometimes you have to launch out into the deep and then see where God takes you. And that's where the journey started of becoming a part-time employee for the church. And then I'd set myself up in business, doing some similar work to what I'd been doing in the security world. So that's how I ended up working for church. And in the midst of that journey of working in the church environment and also working part-time, it kept me very much a foot in the real world of what was going on, and also in the church world, because sometimes there's the bubble that sometimes we get so focused on shepherding the flock that's in our field, we lose track of the fact that there are people on the other side of the hedges, the boundary of that field, who desperately need a bit of shepherding and need somebody to reach out and bring them into the fold and to care for them. So I was partway through kind of like this part-time working for church, part-time doing my own work. I just felt God say, it's good enough for you to tithe and to give offerings. That's great. But what are you going to do over and above with your time, your talents and abilities that sit outside the church environment? And I didn't really know what that was. And again, it brought me to this point where one of the other Assemblies of God ministers in Birmingham, he was the lead chaplain for the local police force. And he'd been on my case saying, oh, you should come as a volunteer chaplain. And I was like, nah, no thanks, I'm all good. It's all right. And eventually this guy got saved in our church who was a 30-year career detective. And I remember speaking to this guy saying, Jonesy, I've been asked if I'd consider be a chaplain. And his immediate reaction, I jest not, this is exactly how it was. His immediate reaction was, oh, you don't want to be a chaplain. they clear the office quicker than the fire alarm. So that was the start of my chaplaincy journey. I was like, okay,
wow.
if that's the base where I'm starting from, I can't really get it too wrong. So I back in 2011, there'd been some disturbances across the United Kingdom. There'd been a death at the hands of the police that had happened, and it had spread to a lot of disturbances, and eventually even on the streets of Birmingham. We were seeing, to all intents and purposes, it was like rioting that was happening on the streets. And I got a little bit cross that I was like, the church should be doing more, and there are people who are strategically placed, connected to policing, who should probably be connecting with our communities and helping to bridge some of that gap, and it didn't happen. So that was the turning point. So in 2011, I was like, I can either stand on the sidelines and do nothing about it, or I can get involved and do something about it. So that's when I stepped out to become a volunteer police chaplain back in 2011. And I did that through to about 6 years ago. And the opportunity arose in one of the neighbouring police forces. So in the United Kingdom, we've got 43 police forces. So they've all got their own chief constable. So it's various districts across the United Kingdom. So the neighbouring district or county is Warwickshire. And,
which is where I used to live.
Which is where you used to live, indeed. And all the troublemakers still come out of Nuneaton and Bedworth.
I know.
So I went to, I carried on working for church part-time, and they employed me part-time as their lead chaplain. That was 6 years ago. In that 6 years, God's been incredibly good. I'd felt a sense of a need to go and do my pastoral training, not because I wanted the title, but for credibility in ministry. So my senior pastors were traveling a lot more, and there were things happening in church life where, as a pastor, it would have helped to have knocked the door and said, "Hi, I'm Matthew, I'm the pastor from the church," rather than, "Hi, I'm Matthew, I'm one of the staff from the church." And then likewise in chaplaincy, I was getting people saying, "Oh, would you do my wedding?" I was like, "Oh, can't do your wedding. I can bury you." You got a date in mind? Book early.
You got the bottles and start swinging them again.
So yeah, for credibility in ministry, that's why I went down the ordination route. And so I became ordained only in May of last year, which was just a process that I did out of credibility for ministry. There was no other, I wasn't going off to plant a church or to do anything else. It wasn't necessarily on my agenda to do those things. My agenda is what's on God's agenda. And I hadn't heard him say that. I was just following those one junction at a time moments, like on a sat nav. And I was ready to whatever God would have in store. And so last year, February of last year, I sat with a group of directors from Police Chaplaincy UK. So I was one of the directors at the time. And we knew the guy who'd been the national chaplain was going to be retiring. And I'd said, we need to write a fresh job description for that role. And we sat there, we reevaluated the charity's purpose and vision and all this kind of stuff. And we wrote this job description. And honestly, in that moment, I didn't even sense a call to apply for the national role. It wasn't on my radar, so to speak. And it was a couple of months after that where all of a sudden I was presented with these three options, which was to go full-time for church, which was to increase my days at Warwickshire as their lead chaplain. And then this third option really came into play, which was to consider applying for the National Police Chaplain role. And that is when I connected with Andy. I was like, I need to speak to somebody who is totally independent and removed from all of this, because I knew I couldn't speak to my own pastors about it because it would be a challenge for them in the midst of it. I couldn't speak to people within police chaplaincy. A lot of my friends are involved with church as well. I was like, well, where can I go to somebody who's totally removed, totally neutral? And there's probably something really in that. And for you, Andy, thank you for your approachability and being able to kind of connect with me and to ask some of those prying questions. And to, I think, there was probably a few tears as I was kind of wrestling with what wasn't making much sense to me at the time. And it was an incredible time to be able to have somebody to speak into my world. Although we'd been detached for like many years, to just have that reconnection was really, really good for me. So yeah, big thank you from me for helping during that time.
I remember you telling me about that.
Yeah. Well, for me, it was, the impact obviously you would have within the church would be church world and people that come in, right? And then the Warwickshire, you were already doing it well. But there was just something, when we were talking, there was just something about being a light in the country and being in the midst of perhaps some of the worst day of someone's life, and you can speak into that. That's what was like, that just felt right,
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I love, we do a lot of that type of stuff with talking to other churches and leaderships and things like that. But this was unique because
you did that big online poll.
Oh, you saw that? I put it out on Twitter.
Matthew's picture. I was like,
I put it out on Twitter, and I just asked, just vote. What do you think I should do? Yeah.
No, but it was we're in church world, right? And so to turn to someone and say, yeah, you need to step out of church world so you can be a bigger impact is not the norm. Over here especially, it's how far can you go up the ladder in church world if you're already in it. But to be able to step out of that and see how God could bless your gift in to people that are a million miles away from God, but you could bring them close to God. Yeah. That's what excited me. And I think, as you're going to share about what's been going on, that was a key moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was blessed that, Andy, you spoke into my life. There was another guy who's a pastor in Great Britain called Stephen Matthews, and Stephen had a great conversation with him. Another guy, Nigel Fawcett Jones, he actually works for the Billy Graham Association, and he's based in the United Kingdom. He's a great guy. He looks after the disaster relief chaplains who turn up in the midst of crisis and get flown around the world. And talking to you and talking to these other two guys, there was a bit of a commonality that came out of this, which was you need to take your treasure to where it will be most valued. Now, I'm not saying that it wouldn't be valued at church, but sometimes the things that we do, the value of what we bring just kind of sits comparable to other people who are around you. But there are sometimes when you take your treasure into a place where you're uniquely welcomed in to take your treasure, because there's a trust in that relationship, and your treasure is valued way higher in that environment than it is elsewhere. And that was one of the things that really stood out to me in those conversations. So it was a wrestle. It really, I got ill during the time of it, in that sense of struggling with how I felt. Am I doing the wrong thing? Like, God, you need to give me a peace in all of this. I firmly believe that when God speaks to me, he speaks with that Philippians kind of peace, a peace that goes beyond my human understanding. Yeah. And I didn't have a peace. And that's the bit I really struggled with. So right the way through, I ended up... It really, God took me to the wire as to whether I should or shouldn't apply for this national role. And the turning point was this. I was asked to preach a wedding of a young couple who the husband-to-be had been on our staff team for a short time, and the wife-to-be was actually a police officer. So there was a double connection in there, and they asked me to speak at their wedding, and they deliberately put me on the table at the wedding reception with a group of young police officers. So there was me and Donna and my kids, so Samuel, Jacob and Hope. We were sat on this table with this group of like 6 young police officers. And inside of me, my heart was breaking, because I was thinking I might be walking away from church leadership. What will church think? Will they still keep me involved in church leadership? Your head goes everywhere as you're trying to figure these things out for yourself. And then I'm sat having these really precious conversations with this group of 6 officers who are like, so what's a chaplain? I don't understand what this means. And these people have got a faith or belief in you. And I'm partway through this conversation, Donna reassuringly put a hand on my leg as if to say, you're doing great, in this conversation. Yeah. And I just had this kind of like, I don't want to walk away from being able to connect with these precious officers who need people to be salt and light in their world. And at a convenient moment, I left the table, and the grounds where they'd had their wedding reception was one of these places. I'm not sure what you call it in the States, but in England, they call them like a living museum. So they have all of these different buildings and from the past, and they build it onto a plot of land, and you get to walk around. It's almost like a living experience of being in the past.
Yeah.
And so they'd built this old Methodist tin like chapel on the grounds. And I walked into this tin chapel, and it's like all these wooden pews and this big lectern at the front. And I sat down on this pew, and I just felt God say, go and stand at the lectern. So then I'm thinking, God's going to speak to me about staying in the church and being a preacher or something. And I went and stood at the front, and the massive old Bible, handwritten calligraphy. And I stand and look down at it, and all I can read on the top of it was 2 Kings 2, and I could not read the calligraphy writing. It was a really old Bible, and it had weathered and so on. And I kind of thought, 2 Kings 2, I wonder if God's speaking to me about that. Oh, maybe he is, maybe he isn't. And over the next coming week or so, I got myself on the app, or I got my Bible out, and I read it. And it's the story of Elijah and Elisha. And the story is where Elisha wants that double blessing from Elijah. And Elijah ascends, and Elijah gets his double blessing, and he crosses back to the other side. And that's pretty much the chapter. And I remember just thinking, well, the guy who's retiring from the National Police Chaplaincy role, he's an Anglican guy, he's a lovely guy, but I don't think I'm going to be getting a double blessing from this guy. And I'm not about to take on pastoring the church, so there's not a double blessing coming from what, Lord, what are you saying in this? And he kept bringing me back and back and back. And literally the weekend before the application would have needed to be in on the Tuesday for the national chaplain role, 4:30 on the Saturday morning, God woke me up. Now, it must have been God, because I am a night owl. I'll stay up till 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm at the peak of my powers late at night, but in the morning, so 4:30, I'll sit up in bed, and I'm like, okay, God, if you're going to speak to me, I'm going to position myself. So I grabbed my Bible, I opened up YouVersion. I was partway through a reading plan. I was like, okay, I've got 12 days left. I read through all 12 days devotionals. I read the scriptures. I was like, come on, Lord, I need to hear from you. And like an hour and a half later, I'm like, yeah, I'm not hearing anything, Lord. And I just felt him say, go back to 2 Kings 2. And I went back to the scripture. I read it again. Same story. It hadn't changed. Same story in 2 Kings 2. So Elisha crosses back to the other side, and that's the story. And then I realized there's like a trail of a few more verses that are just tagged within the end of that chapter. When Elisha returned to the land, he was called for by the leaders of the land. The land had become barren, and the people were perishing. So Elijah took a bowl of salt to the spring. And as soon as I read it, I just felt God say, you need to take a bowl of salt to the spring of policing. You know, salt does 3 things. One, it preserves. And right now in policing globally, but here in the United Kingdom, we're feeling it. There is a sense that we do need to preserve some of the things that are right and proper about policing. Salt purifies.
Yeah.
And we also need some purification in some of the things that have been going on in policing. But also, salt does this incredible thing that it brings the best flavours out as well. And sometimes for our police officers and staff in policing, right now, they're having a hard time of it. They need someone to come alongside them, just add a little bit of salt, bring out the best flavourings, remind them about what they stand for, justice, truth, mercy, peace, all of those things, and to help them in what they do. So, and a bit of purification that needs to go with it as well. Yeah. So that really was the turning point for me. As soon as I felt God had spoke on that, it was at that point in time that I was like, Donna, wake up. I've got to apply for the job. She turned to me, she was like, oh, I'm glad you've caught up. Get on with it. So she felt God would already kind of laid it on her heart with the direction. Sure. So literally over the weekend, wrote the application. I had to go and sit with my chief constable on the Monday and get an endorsement from her to apply for this role. And that in itself was a humbling moment. I sat with her and she was sharing with me some of the stuff that was going on in her world. And she said, anyway, you wanted to see me. What have you come to see me about? I said, oh, Debbie, I'm applying for a job, and I need your endorsement, please. And are you ready with your bleep button, Andy? She
Oh, I haven't got it on. I've got a new board, and I haven't got the. Sorry.
Well, I'll fake it. She banged her hands on the table and she said, "I knew you were going to do this. You will be brilliant at it." She wrote me this incredibly humbling reference based on her experience of chaplaincy over the 5 years that I'd been serving her and her team at Warwickshire. She's not a person of faith, but she now has an appreciation, and she's very inquisitive about the things that go on. And she said if there was a church like hers, like mine, near where she lives, she would visit our church regularly, which is amazing.
Yeah.
So that was the process. So I had the interview. I was appointed in September of last year. I deferred starting till January because I wanted to finish the building project and get the building open and get us in for Christmas and New Year. And then I started in January of this year, and it has been an absolute whirlwind over the last 6 months.
Well, why don't you just share a little bit about perhaps some of the things that you've seen, and definitely the, we talked earlier and we said, how's it going? He says it's going amazing. What is making it amazing? What it has been like the last few months as far as the role that you're doing?
Yeah, I get asked quite a lot, what does an average week look like?
Yeah.
I really don't know. I've not had an average week.
Do they give you a gun?
It's probably a good job that they haven't, to be honest. Because some of the people that I meet, I feel like I probably should need to shoot them in the feet so they don't keep causing hassle for other people. But maybe that's just some of my existing chaplains. And if you're listening, it's only because I want you to be the best. I think some of the highlights have been over this last 6 months period. I've been really intentional about going out and visiting some of the 43 forces, meeting some of their leadership. Most of those 43 forces have got their own lead chaplain, so the person who is there to coordinate the volunteer chaplains. Most of the lead chaplains are employed by the force, sometimes full-time, sometimes part-time. There are a few incredible lead chaplains who volunteer their time almost full-time as the lead chaplain. And most of these people who've done a career in policing have come to faith during that time. Yeah. And in coming to faith, have had such a transformation in their life that they're like, this 30 years in policing feels like it's teed me up already for what comes now in chaplaincy. So yeah, I'm extremely grateful for those incredible people. But going out and visiting those forces and listening to some of their stories around the remarkable things that their chaplains are doing. And sometimes it's a bit rubbish when people say to me, can you write an article or a blog about chaplaincy and some of the things that chaplains are involved with? But you know what? There's so much confidentiality involved with what we do. Sometimes you can't talk about the details, but you have to kind of still talk about the top line information so people can start to dispel what chaplaincy is and bring it back to a real kind of current contextual understanding of what being a chaplain is. What a chaplain is in our police setting is you are a chaplain who is deeply rooted in your faith. So as the national chaplain, I look after, they are a majority of Christian chaplains, but it is a multi-faith provision. Multi-faith, not meaning a mongrel, a mix of bit of Hindu, bit of Buddhist, bit of Christianity, not a mongrel. We're deeply rooted in our respective faith. So if you're a Christian, you are deeply rooted in your Christian faith. And we expect you to have evidence of that in your life. And as you minister, regardless of who you're ministering to, so whether it's somebody of a different faith, your own faith, or somebody who's got a completely different belief structure in life, you're pastorally caring for those people. And there are times where those conversations go a little bit deeper, where it turns into a spiritual conversation. And again, those people, it happened to me last night where I was chatting to a guy. We'd been at a function and he started to talk to me about some of the things that have been going on in his world. And then he brought up some of the music that he used to listen to in his teenage years. And he actually said, I now look back and I would call that music satanic music. And I was like, it's really interesting listening to this guy's language. He's just told me he doesn't do the whole faith and belief stuff, but now he's starting to talk to me about Satan and demonic things. So it's fascinating when you meet these people who've got this kind of stuff going on in their world. So the conversations are absolutely incredible. I've been involved. We've been able to give some leadership during some pretty traumatic stuff that the justice system in England takes a long time to actually come to court for you to talk publicly about cases, but there is a significant case that will probably go to court in about 18 months' time. Once it's in court, maybe we'll talk about it again, but I've never come across a case like this that involves multiple deaths that weren't murders. I can't say too much more than that, but I've never come across a case like this that has had a huge impact on our workforce in that particular police force and right across the community as well. And to be invited into that world to bring some leadership of how can we help that community mourn in that situation? How do we help the officers and staff and volunteers who are also inadvertently have been caught up as almost victims within this investigation, as well as how do we care for those who are actually investigating this horrific set of circumstances? So just bringing leadership into that time. We've got forces who need to raise their standards around chaplaincy. So having those delicate conversations and saying, hey, we really appreciate you, but you've got to do better. They're interesting conversations to be having at the moment. And then there are moments where I get asked to speak at topics and events. So recently in Great Britain, and it's happening around the world, what happened with the death of George Floyd in the States had an immediate effect here in Great Britain. We don't necessarily understand how quickly events travel and have a real meaningful impact and not just become a news item that blows over. And with the death of George Floyd, what we saw in Great Britain was a real kickback to what was happening in policing in the United States, but also how there's been unjust activity within policing towards the Black community and other minority communities in the United Kingdom. And the trajectory from that has led us to a place where policing have launched something called the Police Race Action Plan, how we work with communities, how we actually work with our own police officers and staff of colour and help them to be secure in their job and what they do, and that they've got great opportunities available to them that enables them to grow in policing and to take up leadership roles in the future. But the Police Race Action Plan here in the United Kingdom will, and it continues to receive criticism as well as support. And one of the Police Race Action Plan sessions that was run, it was remarkable. They ran it in a building right near where I grew up in an area called Aston, which is where my parents' church was in Birmingham. And I grew up in that area, and they asked if I would have the closing session of the day where they'd invited influencers from the Black community, media outlets, predominantly with a Black reach and audience that they were connecting with, to be there and to hear about the Police Race Action Plan. And they invited me to come along and to talk about, as a pastor, to be a link between the community and policing, but to be open that I was a chaplain to policing as well. And, it was a remarkable moment. And literally 3 days before this event, we stood less than 500 yards from the venue, and me and a group of other AG ministers stood and marked 100 years of AG Great Britain 3 days beforehand outside of this venue.
Wow.
And I just remember God saying there's something here to do in legacy. And in that closing session on that day, I talked about how my grandparents pastored in Birmingham, and their congregation was filled by people from the Caribbean who were settling during the Windrush era, and then how my parents went on to lead that same church, which it was a majority Black congregation. And then how there was things that happened in the city that my dad spoke to about justice in the midst of racial tensions. And there was an example to me as well. So even back then, I think about what happened to me in 2011, where something stirred up inside of me, where there was an issue to do with racial injustice. When I look at those things, I got to speak at the end of that Police Race Action Plan event, and just to talk with an absolute passion and understanding around how two generations before me have paved the way for the black communities in England to actually advance and to press forward. So I just talked about, how I witnessed my parents and my grandparents have held the door open so people can actually pass through it with a lot more ease and support and be pastorally cared for. So moments like that have been a highlight. And even this last week has just been a real buzz. So every other year we run a police chaplaincy conference. And it was the police chaplaincy conference this week. So it was Monday through to Wednesday. And it was the first time that me being in my post got to lead that conference environment. The culture was great. The feedback's been wonderful. Yeah. It's been a stretch of thinking for people. It's just been an absolute honour and privilege. And then yesterday I was down in central London in Westminster, and again had the opportunity to speak to 150 of the people who are support staff to the most senior people within policing. Wow. And just to give an input to them was just phenomenal. So it's been a real buzz of a week.
Amazing.
So there is no what an average week looks like, but some of those conversations go really, really deep. Some of them are quite top line, but they lead to something else a little bit further down the line.
Brilliant.
Wow, well, love it.
Well, Matthew, would you pray for those that are listening? And I think what you've hit on is really good. Yeah, the police and everything is amazing, but the message that just keeps coming through is hearing God and the whole sat-nav idea of just listening to God's voice and directing and being open to move, right? Yeah, could you just pray into that a little bit for those that may be thinking, what am I going to do in my life? What do I need to, if you could pray into that, that would be great.
Yeah, a bit of a life scripture for me is trust in the Lord with all of your heart. Lean not on your own understanding, and he'll direct your paths. So yeah, it's just pause for a moment of prayer. Yeah. Father God, we thank you. In the midst of me being able to share my journey, Father, I thank you for those who are connected and are listening today, where they may be struggling with a sense of what is the purpose and fulfillment in their lives, but they want to honor you with everything. Lord, as they choose to trust in you with all of their heart, as they choose to try and just disconnect some of their own understanding, but choose to fully rely on you, Lord, I pray that you communicate with them, lead them, direct them, cause them to have some significant God moments where they reevaluate, like I did on the day of 9/11, those moments that cause us to reevaluate the trajectory of our lives and to choose to be aligned to your will, your plan, and your purpose for our lives. For those, Father, particularly who are already in ministry, who may be feeling a bit of a challenge with what the next season looks like, Father, I pray that you still that raging storm that exists as we wrestle with what comes next. Lord, we pray for peace into their situation. And as that peace comes, Lord, I pray that you speak with an absolute clarity into their world. Lord, we trust you. We want our lives to be a reflection of you, how we trust in your will and your way for our lives, so it becomes a testimony to those other people that we have the privilege to lead or to share with. Father, we ask these things in your mighty and precious name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Amen. Thank you.
Well, Matthew, is there a way, or for folks that are listening, a way for people to follow your journey or even the police chaplaincy over in the UK?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So there's a couple of ways of doing that. So I still gently dip into the world of Twitter or X. I try not to read it too much, but I choose to try and be a bit of salt. Yeah. try and put something positive in there. Yeah. So you can follow me on Twitter. So I'm on there, Matthew_Hopley. You can find me on there. But actually where I post a little bit more insightful content around what's happening within the police chaplaincy world is through my LinkedIn profile. So I feel free, if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, you'll find me on there as Matthew Hopley. You can connect with me on there and you'll see some of the meanderings, and I tend to take a few selfies when I'm out about with people in different locations and share a bit about the type of meeting that I've been in. Sure. So yeah, they're two easy ways to stay connected.
Great. Well, one of the things we always do is the big three. Do you want me to start, Chuck? Because I've got a couple. Is that all right? Okay, so three questions about you that may not have anything to do with the conversation. They may do, but okay, first question. I am a huge crime detective, true crime, and also British TV shows. What is your favorite policing crime show that you watch?
Okay, so the ones that are trying to convey a bit of a true story, I just get triggered watching them because of the inaccuracies.
Yeah.
I'll sit there and just like, if that cop was that corrupt, you'd have figured it out a long time ago.
Yeah.
So the one that I would watch is Police Interceptors. Oh. And Police Interceptors are a series that are based on the body cam footage that a police officer would wear, or their vehicle cameras, or occasionally they've got a film crew who will travel with them.
So this is true. This is like reality.
It's absolutely factual stuff. So you get to see, if you like the bit of the buzz side of policing, all the high performance cars and doing all the pursuits and all that kind of stuff. But actually, for me, in those moments, it always just affirms to me the incredible people who are behind the steering wheel of those vehicles, or those people in the control rooms, or flying the helicopter in that pursuit. Yeah. And then those who get out and run after to serve and protect the public. It gives me a fresh appreciation of actually, when I'm not out and about with them, watching them do that, when I'm in the station, I'm meeting those people and having really precious conversations. It just reminds me of actually the really traumatic things that they deal with in the life of policing. So I'm not somebody who comes home and deliberately puts it on to watch it. But if I was going to watch them, that's what I'd be watching.
I really thought you were going to say Vera. But, that's a show in England. So
okay.
Chuck, but that's good. That's okay. Chuck, you're
okay. Now, normally our big three don't have anything to do. They're random stuff. But is there anything, since you've become this national chaplain and you meet with police officers, men and women every day who lay their lives on the line and they serve the community to protect? Is there anything that perhaps now you didn't know about police officers before you started this, that's something that just jumps out that maybe didn't beforehand?
Yeah, sure. Here's a real bang up to date illustration. So yesterday was funny, but it was also quite impactful at the same time. There's a couple of really funny things that happened yesterday. But to answer that question, I did an event where I asked people to be really, really honest and to share by writing on a Post-it note 3 things that are adding pressure in their world right now. So it might be work related, it might be home related, and then to place those 3 things into. I'll tell you in a minute. I'd got a saucepan with me, and I asked them to put it into the saucepan. I'll come back to why in a minute because it's really random. And then called out and read some of those out. But the last time I did that exercise, the thing that totally caught me by surprise that was causing the most pressure in people's world is caring for an adult at the moment. So maybe a parent or grandparent who's got mental health issues or developed Alzheimer's, or there's other things. Maybe they've got a grown-up child who's got additional needs. And it really took me by surprise that the most common thing out of a group of about 150 people I'd done the presentation with, that they said the biggest challenge in their world right now is caring for another adult. Wow. So that caught me by surprise.
Yeah. All right. Well, third question. You obviously are the national chaplain, right? So you get to go all over the UK. What is your favorite part of the UK?
Yeah. Yeah. I love being by the water. But they say Birmingham has got more miles of canals than Venice.
Really?
Wow. Yeah. Wow, so there's a massive canal network in Birmingham. And apparently we've got more miles of canals than there is in Venice. We've got great food. We've got Cadbury's.
Oh, come on. The Cadbury's factory.
I'm down with the Cadbury's. Let's go.
Man.
Yeah.
God hasn't told me to leave Birmingham. So, yeah, you guys keep going on and on and on about taking Revival Town on the road. You know, eventually you might get round to it, I suppose.
Yes.
You could come to Birmingham and we
Yes.
will do Revival Town in Birmingham. How's that sound?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah,
man.
we're
we
in.
could get Matthew. We could get Tim Hughes to come. We could do a whole Birmingham thing.
We could nail it in Birmingham. Yeah.
Man, you know, and I was looking it up as you were talking earlier, because I mean, I was going to say I haven't been to the UK, but I have for 24
hours.
Everybody who's listening
but
knows
Birmingham,
that you haven't really been to the UK.
Well, I looked up the population thinking it was maybe a small community, but it's like over 1 million people.
In Birmingham.
Yeah, Birmingham.
Yeah, it's a big area.
Yep.
Yeah,
All right, well, we're going to do something. Go on.
I was going to say, Birmingham has got the youngest age population out of all of the cities across Europe.
Really?
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
That's interesting.
Wow.
Yeah,
well, we're going to do something different.
Yeah.
Okay, because we normally are doing Tate and his mate with me and you, but we are going to do Tate and his mate with Matthew.
Yes.
Because he feels he's got a word that could stump you.
All right.
And for those that are listening or watching for the first time, this is where I would try and use an English word, phrase,
Or rhyming Cockney slang.
Yay!
Yes.
And so today, instead of me doing it, Matthew is going to shoot this word out to Chuck, and we're going to see if he knows what this English word is that we don't use over here.
Yes.
All right, go for it.
I have been racking my brains trying to think of a word, but I had this experience on the train yesterday heading into London. It was a bit of a surreal moment where I've been sat on the train for about 45 minutes. I don't know what it's like for you guys in the US, but the train was silent. Everybody doesn't really look at each other. It was very, very busy. And I'm sat opposite a lady, and another lady sat next to me, and the other guy was in his own world with his headphones on, doing his own thing. And the guy on the other side of the aisle was fidgeting, and he kept moving around. And the lady opposite me looked up and made eye contact with me, kind of like rolled her eyes at this guy who was moving around. And the most hilarious thing happened, and I had to try and keep my face straight in this moment. But he got up and packed his bag ready to move. But as he got his stuff together and he turned, and I'm sat down and he stood up. His backside is right next to my face. It breaks wind.
Yeah, we call that a chocolate whisper.
So I'm trying to I'm thinking, don't acknowledge it. But the lady who's sat opposite me, her eyes go wide and looks up and makes eye contact with me. The lady who sat next to me looks to me and she said, I'm so glad that I wasn't the only one who heard it. But it broke the ice, who broke something else as well. It broke the ice.
I was going to say, it broke something.
But it led to the lady opposite me starting a conversation. And she was an American lady. And the lady sat next to me was also from Birmingham. And the conversation starts, and they end up talking about education in the United Kingdom. And the lady, the Brommy lady next to me says this phrase, did you wag it? Did you wag it? The word is wag.
Wag.
Did you wag it?
Like wag your tail, or whack, like whack.
Yeah,
wag.
like a tail would wag.
Wag. Did you wag it?
Yeah.
And the American lady sat opposite me goes, guys, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Did you wag it? Okay, so I'm outnumbered today.
Yeah.
It's 2 Brits against 1. So I am making a phone call right now and putting on speaker. I've never done this before.
Oh, okay.
Oh, man.
This is superfan Susan Weldon. If she answers,
Remember, I don't know if you know Susan. She's super fan.
Oops, I called the wrong Susan. I called the wrong Susan. I called our children's director on our staff. She's gonna call me back and go, hey, I missed your call. All right, wrong Susan. Here we go. This is the right Susan. So
are you sure?
Did I wag it?
Oh, man. Here we go. It's not going through your hearing aid, is it? Okay, good.
No.
Good.
I turned that off.
The other end.
Hey, Chuck, what's up?
Hey, so Susan, we are live on Revival Town podcast. This is not a joke, and we are interviewing Andy's good friend Matthew Hopley, who is also a fan of Revival Town. He is the National Chaplain for police officers in the UK, and we are doing Take This Mate. They ganged up on me. The word is wag it. Wag it. Did you wag it? What does that mean?
Say, what's Andy's sentence for it? I don't know that.
Okay, so here's and I don't know if you're going to be able to hear Matthew or not, but so he was on a train and some guy was standing and that guy's bottom was in his face and he broke wind. So the lady sitting next to him is from Birmingham, like him, and they got talking. There was an American woman also that was having this conversation, and they were talking about this term "wag it," and the American woman said, "I have no idea what you're talking about." So, did you wag it? Is that?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Oh man, I'm having trouble with it.
You're having trouble with it.
It sounds vaguely familiar, darn it.
Okay.
All right. Let's mix it up.
All right.
I'm going to give you a second word that means the same, but I know that you will not know what it is. So you're getting a double go at this. The same word, wag it. Another version is bunking off.
Bunking off.
Bunking off. I'm gonna bunk off now. I'm gonna sign off, Susan, and I'll call you back and fill you in on how it went because I don't think you can hear what's in my ear. So, thank you, Susan.
But I don't know.
Bye bye.
Do you guys have Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? So it gets to the end and the person's still talking.
Call a friend.
The presenter's like, boop, cuts them off.
Okay, so wagging it and bunking off.
Bunking off. Wag it. So.
Andy, did you ever wag it?
You know, I never did. I was a good boy.
Yeah, you were a good pastor's kid, weren't you?
Yeah.
I would say, is that where you break wind intentionally? No, wag it. Here, I'm going to wag it.
Okay, this word has nothing to do with the guy breaking wind.
Okay.
It just led to a conversation. It broke the ice and it led to a
Did
conversation. So we were talking about education, and the Brommy lady said, "Did you ever wag it?"
You are stumped, aren't you, Chuck?
Ah, come on. Did you ever bunk off?
School.
Did you? Oh, I did. Did you ever skip school?
Yay!
Oh!
With a little bit of help.
I couldn't get my mind off of this.
With a little bit of
guy.
He was stuck on the guy passing wind.
Neither could I, to be honest.
Farting in your face.
Oh, well, we got there.
Right,
we
skipped school.
Yeah.
Wow.
Great. Well, Matthew, thank you so much for coming on to Revival Town today. I know people are going to love this. They're intrigued with this. And we definitely just keep us posted about the big case that you were talking about, that in 18 months you'll be able to talk about. And let's definitely get you back on with some of the more stories that you were able to talk about.
Yes.
In the future. But thanks for coming on to Revival Town podcast today.
It's been great to be with you guys. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks,
thank you, Matt.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Revival Town Podcast. Make sure you're following us on social media and remember to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. For more information, head on over to revivaltownpodcast.com.
Revival.